Riven Malhotra's body was found in his Pune apartment. Ayesha Kaur's cafe in Punjab hid dangerous secrets. Devansh Rathi's empire thrived in shadows. Samar Vaidya risked his life chasing the truth, and Meera Solanki uncovered a code that tied them all together. One chilling word: Chaska. Riven Malhotra's name had become synonymous with success in Maharashtra's growing business world. At just 32, he had managed to build a reputation as a bold investor who was willing to take risks others would never dare. His luxury apartment in Pune stood as a symbol of his fast rise, a place filled with imported furniture, expensive art, and carefully guarded secrets. But on a humid evening in 2018, that apartment became the center of a mystery that would travel far beyond state borders and expose an underworld few had ever seen. When the police entered the scene after neighbors complained of a strange silence, they found Riven lifeless on the polished marble floor. There were no signs of forced entry, no missing valuables, no broken locks. Instead, the chilling presence of handwritten notes scattered across the room left everyone unsettled. Each note carried only one word, repeated over and over in uneven handwriting: Chaska. At first, the investigators thought it was the work of someone mentally unstable. The killer had not touched Riven's jewelry, watches, or even the envelopes of cash kept in his study. Everything remained untouched, except for the victim himself. The crime scene was too neat, too carefully staged, as if someone had spent hours making sure there was no clear evidence. Yet the repeated word on the notes suggested intention rather than madness. What did Chaska mean, and why would someone risk leaving behind a signature that could potentially link them to the crime? The unanswered questions immediately turned the murder into one of the most puzzling cases Pune police had handled in recent years. As investigators went through Riven's personal belongings, they began to piece together fragments of his life that didn't match the image of a disciplined businessman. His phone revealed dozens of calls to a woman in Punjab, Ayesha Kaur, whose name meant nothing to them at first. There were also recent travel records showing multiple trips to Amritsar and Ludhiana, destinations that seemed unusual for a man whose business was primarily based in Maharashtra. It became clear that Riven had connections outside his professional circle, connections that could explain why someone wanted him dead. Detectives found it strange that in the last week of his life, Riven had withdrawn large sums of cash, yet no trace of that money was found in his apartment. Where had it gone? The deeper the team dug, the stranger the puzzle became. Riven's laptop, which he always kept close, was missing entirely. His office documents were untouched, but personal emails showed cryptic exchanges with unknown accounts that referenced deliveries, routes, and payments. These weren't the words of a regular entrepreneur, but rather of someone involved in risky deals. The possibility emerged that his murder wasn't personal but tied to something larger, something spread across state. Even more unsettling was the fact that Chaska wasn't found only on notes. It was written on the inside of Riven's wardrobe, scribbled hastily with a black marker, as if meant to be discovered. Neighbors described Riven as polite but distant, a man who rarely attended social events and spent long hours on late-night phone calls. On the night of his death, no one had heard screams, only the faint sound of music playing from his apartment, until it abruptly stopped. Surveillance cameras in the building showed no unusual visitors, except for a delivery man whose face was obscured by a helmet. That man never returned, and his identity could not be traced. For the first time, the investigators began to suspect that this was a carefully executed hit, designed to leave no immediate trail. The killer had managed to slip in and out with precision, leaving behind only the strange word that became the haunting symbol of the case. The police struggled to explain the meaning of it all. Was Chaska a personal nickname? A message to someone else? A code? While theories floated around, one thing became undeniable. Riven's death wasn't just a random act of violence. It was the beginning of a larger story that stretched far beyond Pune, reaching deep into Punjab's shadows, where crime and business intertwined in ways few could imagine. And as investigators stared at those scattered notes, they knew this was not a crime they could easily close. It was a story just beginning to unfold, one that would reveal how ambition, greed, and betrayal had collided in the life of a man who thought he was untouchable. Ayesha Kaur lived a life that looked ordinary from the outside, yet every detail of her existence carried the weight of secret. Her cafe in Amritsar had become a popular spot for students, travelers, and locals, a place where the smell of roasted coffee beans mingled with the sound of soft Punjabi music. To outsiders, she was simply a hard-working woman building a name for herself in the community. Customers admired her politeness, her ability to remember regular orders, and the warm smile she carried behind the counter. But beneath the surface, there was a story no one dared to speak about openly. Her wealth grew faster than her cafe could explain, and her sudden ownership of multiple properties across Punjab raised quiet suspicions. People whispered about her connections to men who moved drugs and illegal goods across state borders, but fear kept their mouths shut. No one wanted to cross her, because those who did were known to disappear or suddenly leave town without explanation. Investigators tracing Riven Malhotra's calls soon discovered that Ayesha was not just a casual acquaintance. His phone records showed dozens of late-night conversations with her in the months leading up to his murder. Travel logs confirmed that Riven had been in Amritsar at least 3 times, often staying for only a day before returning to Pune. These short visits made little sense for a businessman unless there was something urgent pulling him there. When police quietly sent word to their counterparts in Punjab, a disturbing picture began to form. Ayesha was not an unknown figure in law enforcement circles. Her name had appeared before, buried in files linked to smuggling investigations, but she always slipped away untouched. The key to her protection was her association with Devansh Rathi, a powerful land dealer, whose influence spread across Punjab and stretched into Maharashtra. Devansh owned farms, warehouses, and construction projects, but his real power lay in the connections he had built with politicians and corrupt officers. It was through him that Ayesha's operations ran smoothly, hidden under the cover of legitimate business. Trucks carrying produce often carried something more concealed beneath layers of vegetables or grain. Routes between Punjab and Maharashtra became silent highways for narcotics, and money flowed so freely that anyone who stood in the way was quickly removed. For the syndicate, Riven had been a valuable asset. His clean business image allowed them to launder large sums of money without raising suspicion. Yet behind the cooperative smiles and phone calls, a conflict was brewing. Journalist Samar Vaidya, who had been tracking the suspicious rise of young entrepreneurs in Punjab, came across Ayesha's name while following property records. The documents revealed that she had purchased land far beyond her apparent income, and in one deal her co-signer was none other than Riven Malhotra. Samar's instincts told him this was not a normal partnership. He began piecing together their network, noticing how both had connections to Devansh Rathi. What started as a business triangle was slowly beginning to look like a criminal arrangement. Samar noted that each time Riven traveled to Amritsar, there were spikes in cross-state truck movement. The journalist's curiosity grew, and he began reaching out to sources who hinted that the word Chaska might not be random graffiti, but a marker used by this very network to track drug shipments. While police hesitated to act without evidence, Samar's pursuit made Ayesha increasingly nervous. She had worked hard to maintain the illusion of being nothing more than a cafe owner. Any public exposure threatened not only her but also the empire Devansh had built. The truth was that Ayesha's cafe served a secondary purpose. It was a safe meeting spot for couriers and dealers, a place where deals could be finalized under the noise of clinking cups. Few noticed the pattern of strangers entering and leaving quickly, or the frequent delivery vans that stopped without ever unloading coffee supplies. Behind the charm of her smile was a calculating mind that knew how to balance fear with friendliness. For investigators in Pune, the discovery of her name felt like a breakthrough, but they still didn't know how it tied directly to Riven's murder. The connection between a businessman in Maharashtra and a cafe owner in Punjab seemed unlikely until Devansh's name came into play. His shadow fell across every page of their investigation, and yet he remained untouchable. Ayesha's involvement with him suggested that Riven's murder was not just about personal betrayal, but about something larger, a warning to anyone who tried to walk away from the empire. The further the investigators looked, the clearer it became that Punjab held the answers to the questions left behind in Pune. Yet they also realized that stepping into Ayesha's world meant entering a place where law and crime were hopelessly tangled, and where one wrong move could mean the end of anyone searching for the truth. The word left behind at the crime scene haunted everyone working on the investigation. Chaska was more than just a meaningless scribble. It felt deliberate, a signature, and investigators could not ignore it. The notes scattered across the apartment suggested that the killer had wanted the word to be remembered. Weeks passed without clarity, and while officers tried to trace financial records and possible enemies of Riven Malhotra, the meaning of that single word kept them trapped. They searched through Riven's emails, bank statements, and messages, yet no obvious link appeared. It was only when Meera Solanki, a law student with an interest in true crime, came across the case while researching organized crime in Punjab, that a breakthrough emerged. She had read of a term used in street culture to describe addiction, not only to substances but also to the lifestyle surrounding them. In Punjab's underworld, Chaska had long been a code word, used by dealers to identify both their products and their clients. It meant habit, thrill, or craving, but within criminal circles, it served as a discreet label for illegal shipments. Meera's discovery shifted the investigation's direction. The word wasn't random at all, it was connected to the world Riven had entered. The businessman, once thought to be an innocent victim, was now tied directly to narcotics operations, stretching from Punjab to Maharashtra. His personal communications began to make sense. The references to routes and deliveries matched the timing of truck shipments that investigators later discovered had been flagged by customs in border areas. Even more telling were the sudden spikes in his bank withdrawals, always followed by his trips north. The money wasn't for investments, but payments into the system that ran on hidden codes and trusted signals. Chaska wasn't simply a taunt from a murderer, it was the seal of the very network Riven had once profited from. The more the truth came out, the darker the image of Riven became. While he had lived as a polished businessman in Pune, his wealth had been increasingly tied to Ayesha Kaur and Devansh Rathod. He had provided cover for their transactions, disguising dirty money as legitimate business profit. His involvement allowed the syndicate to expand further into Maharashtra without attracting attention. But something had gone wrong in the weeks before his death. Sources whispered that Riven had grown restless, worried that the authorities were closing. He had allegedly threatened to cut ties with the network, and even hinted he might expose its operations if they pushed him further. That threat may have been his final mistake. For Ayesha and Devansh, betrayal was not something tolerated. If Riven truly planned to abandon them, they needed to make an example out of him. The word Chaska left on his walls and scattered around his body was not only symbolic but also a warning. It told anyone who understood its meaning that this was the price of disloyalty. It was their way of sending a message without saying it outright. While outsiders saw only nonsense, those inside the trade would immediately recognize the weight of that word. It was a mark of death, designed to strike fear into anyone considering a similar move. The revelation pushed the investigation into dangerous territory. Samar Vidya, who had already been tracking Ayesha's unusual rise, realized the truth before police made it public. He saw that the code connected cases across states, tying missing shipments, unexplained money transfers, and now murder together. His articles hinted at corruption and smuggling, though he avoided naming Ayesha or Devansh directly, aware that exposing them without evidence could cost him his life. But even his subtle reporting drew unwanted attention. Threatening messages began to reach him, unsigned, carrying only one word, Chaska. It was clear that someone knew how close he was getting. Meera too faced pressure. Her professors warned her against involving herself in an active investigation, but she couldn't step away. She began piecing together academic research, legal documents, and old case files, finding repeated appearances of the same code word in records that had gone unnoticed for years. The pattern was undeniable, yet each time a case neared trial, it vanished from the courts. Witnesses withdrew, evidence disappeared, and charges were quietly dropped. It showed how deeply rooted the network was, how much protection it enjoyed from powerful figures. The law student realized she wasn't just uncovering a linguistic clue, but exposing an entire system built on fear, money, and silence. The more that surfaced, the clearer it became that Revan's death was not random or impulsive. It had been carefully staged to carry a message. His role in the syndicate had shifted from trusted partner to potential liability, and in their world, liabilities were eliminated. The apartment filled with notes was both a crime scene and a billboard. Whoever killed him wanted the story told in whispers, wanted the code to echo through the circles that understood it. For the investigators, Chaska was the bridge connecting Maharashtra's unsolved murder to Punjab's underground empire. For those within the network, it was a final reminder of what awaited anyone tempted to betray. As the investigation pressed forward, the clean image of Revan Malhotra began to crumble in ways that shocked those who had once admired him. Early reports had painted him as a victim caught in a dangerous web, but hidden financial trails revealed that he was not entirely innocent. He had been deeply involved in laundering money for Ayesha Kaur and Devansh Rathi, using his legitimate business ventures as a cover for their growing empire. Large sums of cash flowed through his accounts, disguised as profits from exports and property sales, but investigators uncovered transfers that had no logical explanation. He had built a second life behind the polished glass doors of his office, one where criminal dealings blended seamlessly with his public reputation as a risk-taking entrepreneur. The discovery made his murder even more complicated. He was not only a victim but also a partner in crime. For months, Revan had been considered reliable by his partners. His role as a businessman gave the syndicate access to channels they couldn't easily manipulate on their own. But ambition and fear had begun to change him. Rumors spread that he had grown wary of Devansh's influence, worried that the network was drawing too much attention. Some said Revan wanted to exit quietly, taking his share of profits, and disappearing before the law caught up. Others believed he had threatened to expose their operations unless he was given a larger cut of the business. Either way, Ayesha and Devansh saw him as a liability, someone who knew too much, and could destroy years of carefully built connections, if he chose the wrong moment to speak. The decision to remove him was not taken lightly. Devansh was known for calculating every move, ensuring that nothing could be traced back to him. Ayesha, who operated closer to the ground, carried out much of the practical plan. Evidence later suggested that in the days before the murder, she traveled frequently between Amritsar and smaller towns, where the syndicate stored goods. Witnesses recalled seeing her at a local bank, withdrawing large sums of cash, her face partially hidden under a scarf. She thought no one would notice, but security cameras captured fleeting images that would later become crucial in connecting her to the crime. When the night of Revan's murder came, it was staged with precision. The killer had entered the apartment without breaking a single lock, suggesting that either Revan knew them, or the network had gained access through inside knowledge of the building. The crime was cold, swift, and deliberate. The scattered notes were a part of the plan, left behind not as carelessness, but as a message. Chaska was more than a word. It was a signature of the organization, a reminder to all insiders that betrayal carried only one outcome. To law enforcement, it was confusing, but to those in the trade, it was crystal clear. When journalist Samar Vaidya uncovered Ayesha's suspicious movements and hinted at her involvement in his reports, the balance of control began to shift. The articles didn't directly accuse her, but the timing was enough to raise public suspicion. Police, pressured by the media, started connecting the dots. For the first time, Ayesha's protective shield began to crack. An order was prepared for her questioning, but before authorities could reach her, she vanished. Her cafe, once bustling with customers, was left abandoned. Inside, investigators found a phone burned beyond repair, fragments of papers reduced to ash,
And most disturbing of all, small traces of blood smeared near the back door. Whether the blood belonged to Ayesha or someone else was never confirmed, but the discovery added another chilling layer to the case. Her disappearance turned the case upside down. With Revan dead and Ayesha missing, suspicion fell heavily on Devon. Yet his power was so vast that the investigation seemed to stall each time it reached him. Witnesses grew silent, records disappeared, and officers shifted away from probing his role. Despite the mountain of circumstantial evidence, he remained untouchable. Meanwhile, whispers grew in criminal circles that Ayesha had not been killed, but relocated, hidden away by Devonsh himself to protect both her and the Empire. The truth of her fate became a mystery, but one thing was undeniable: Revan's murder had not been a simple crime of passion or greed. It had been a warning, a carefully designed betrayal, orchestrated by those closest to him. For Samar, the story became personal. Each lead he followed ended with intimidation, threatening letters and the silent reminder of that one word that now haunted him as much as it had haunted the investigators. Chaska. The deeper he went, the more he realized that exposing the truth would not only risk his career, but his life. And yet, he couldn't let go. The threads of betrayal had drawn him too far, and the mystery of Ayesha's disappearance suggested that the syndicate was more dangerous and more organized than anyone dared to admit. The Maharashtra murder was no longer just a single tragedy. It was the visible crack in an empire that lived in shadows. Months passed after the death of Revan Malhotra, yet the case remained as unsettling as the day his body had been found. For the public, it faded into the background of other crimes that filled newspapers, but for those who had followed it closely, the unanswered questions refused to disappear. The police, facing pressure to resolve the case, eventually labeled it unsolved, citing lack of evidence and unwilling witnesses. It seemed to be the end of the investigation, but for the few individuals still chasing the truth, it was only the beginning of something much larger and more dangerous. Mira Solanki, the law student who had first connected the word Chaska to the world of narcotics, continued her research in silence. What started as academic curiosity had grown into an obsession. In the archives of her university library, she uncovered a set of files from earlier cases across Punjab. These files revealed a chilling pattern. Each involved suspicious deaths, sudden withdrawals of charges, and missing witnesses. Hidden in the notes of investigators were repeated mentions of the same word. It appeared in graffiti on walls, scribbled in margins, or whispered in recorded testimonies, before they abruptly ended. Chaska was not just a one-time mark. It was the signature of a network that had been operating for years, leaving a trail of fear that no one had dared to follow. Meanwhile, Samar Vaidya's reporting had made him both respected and targeted. Readers admired his persistence in digging into Revan's connections, but his articles also drew the wrath of those who wanted the truth buried. Anonymous letters began arriving at his office. Some carried only the word Chaska, written in bold, while others included photographs of him walking alone at night, as if to remind him that he was being watched. Friends advised him to step back, but Samar's determination only grew stronger. He believed the death of Revan Malhotra was a doorway into exposing the larger empire, built by Devonsh and protected by layers of corruption. Devonsh himself became almost mythical in the way he operated. Despite mounting suspicions, no charges ever stuck to him. Each time investigators approached his name, paperwork vanished, evidence was misplaced, and officers were reassigned. His businesses flourished, expanding into new cities with suspicious ease. In public, he appeared as nothing more than a wealthy land dealer with powerful friends, but in whispers he was known as the silent architect of the cross-state drug trade. Those who had once worked under Revan now shifted their loyalty entirely to Devonsh, ensuring that the network remained untouched. The absence of Ayesha Kaur added to the mystery. Her abandoned cafe in Amritsar became a site of speculation. Some believed she had been eliminated by Devonsh to remove any loose ends, while others whispered that she was alive, hidden under a new identity in another state, still managing parts of the operation from the shadow. No body was ever found, and no confirmed sightings could be verified, but her name carried the same weight of fear as the word she had left behind. For those in the trade, Ayesha remained a ghost, who had proven how easily people could vanish when they knew too much. For Mira and Samar, the case transformed from a simple investigation into a life-altering truth. They realized they were facing not a single crime, but an entire system shielded by money and influence. Every clue pointed to the same reality. Justice would never come through official channels. The system itself was too compromised, too carefully constructed to fall apart because of one man's murder. Still, they both continued quietly gathering fragments of information, knowing that the cost of speaking out could be fatal. The most chilling moment arrived when Samar received a package one evening. Inside was a single folded note. There was no handwriting, no explanation, just the familiar words staring back at him in bold ink. Chaska. The message was clear. The syndicate knew exactly who was digging and how far they had gone. It was not just a warning but a declaration that they were watching, waiting and ready to silence anyone who threatened the empire. Samar realized then that the story was not about closure or justice. It was about survival. The Maharashtra murder case, officially marked as unsolved, was far from finished. It became a ghost story whispered in both Maharashtra and Punjab, a reminder of the invisible lines of power drawn by crime and fear. For the investigators, it was a failure that haunted their records. For the victims, it was a silence that would never be broken. And for those who understood the code, it was the undeniable truth that the empire of Chaska lived on, expanding quietly, feeding on the same ambition and betrayal that had once destroyed Riva and Maharashtra. The final unanswered question was not who killed him, but how many more would fall before the word lost its power.